gold smelting is a show, my favorite show, and also Mama's favorite show of all time. And what's even better, if we have that much of gold, really. If we have that much of gold, that will be right here. Okay, so the show hasn't started yet, so we'll start in 5 minutes.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Kate. I am one of the gold pourers here at Sovereign Hill. This building is called the Gold Smelting Works. We are part of the surface operations for the company Quartz Mine, so the mine that exists just a little bit further up the hill there. I work for them. It is my pleasure today to show you what this role was, and explain to you why we were doing it during this period of time, and also talk a little bit about where the gold has been before it got to us here in the Gold Smelting Works. We are generally the last people in a bit of a process or a chain of events to see that gold before it heads off to a bank in Melbourne. So I'll talk you through that today. While I'm doing that, it'll be about 10 minutes that we need to chat for. I do have behind me in the furnace a large amount of gold that I'll be melting for you. Once that's ready to go, I will be able to pour that for you and show you what that looks like as well. Very quickly, I will address, some people do have questions about it sometimes. This is not something I obviously would have been doing during this period of time. This was a trained, well-paid company role, which of course women weren't able to do at the time. I am fortunate enough today to be able to show you what that looks like though. So we are called a mine blacksmith or an industrial blacksmith, something along those lines, and we're very different to the other kinds of blacksmith that you will meet around Sovereign Hill. The main difference being that we don't make anything, so we're not making shoes for horses or tools, picks, shovels for miners. We don't even really fix anything in here. Our job in here is simply to purify and pour gold. When we're talking about purifying gold, what we mean is that no matter where you find gold anywhere in the world, not just Ballarat, anywhere, it will never come out of the ground 100% pure solid gold. Gold actually just doesn't exist like that underground. The gold will always be mixed in with other elements, what we call impurities, things like silver, copper, iron, zinc, that sort of thing. In fact, those are the common ones that we see here in Ballarat. And those things do by themselves have their own purpose. But when you mix it in with gold underground, it actually brings the quality of that gold down, or the purity of that gold, which affects the value of the gold. Now, gold is measured two different ways. The first one is its weight, how heavy it is, and then the second way is its purity. And we talk about purity in terms of carats. So 24 carat being the best pure 99.99% gold, right? That doesn't exist underground, but what we can do is we can smelt that gold or melt it down. We can remove all of those other impurities like the silver, the copper, the iron, and we can return the gold to the company in a more pure condition, therefore more valuable. Now, this particular role was quite competitive here in Ballarat because we worked out pretty early on, within the first 5 or 6 years, that the gold coming out of our ground here in Ballarat already sits at about 22 carats. Now that's about 92% pure straight out of the ground, which is actually some of the most pure natural gold you can find anywhere in the world. For that reason, it made this job a little bit competitive because this is a paid trained position. It does take 7 years of unpaid apprenticeship work before you can do this job, and it's not a huge leap to go from 22 carats to 24 carats. It doesn't take a whole lot of extra time, effort, resources. So it was quite a competitive role, well paid and relatively safe. We'll talk about the dangers in just a moment, other than the obvious one, the temperature. Now, very early on, we were doing something called alluvial mining. So I'll just talk about that really quickly. It's not what the company was doing, but if you happen to be here in the first 10 years, you would have been using methods of alluvial mining. What that means is that all gold, it starts inside this kind of rock. You've seen that before? Quite common. It's called quartz. The gold can be in there. There can also be nothing in there at all. But generally, what we find underground is big veins of this rock, and inside that will be gold. Now, over millions of years, through erosion, volcanic activity underground, and a lot of water, that gold can erode out of that rock. We call that stuff the alluvial gold. You can find alluvial gold generally in water systems, either on the surface or underground. Now, if you panned it our creek today, that would be known as shallow surface alluvial mining. You can use a method called deep lead mining, which became quite popular here in Ballarat, and that's essentially intersecting your shaft with an underground creek or root system. Now, the reason that deep lead mining was pretty much the only thing that people in Ballarat were doing for the first 10 years is because we had a significant amount of water, a huge water table that sits at about 300 feet below the surface, and for 10 years we don't have any steam powered machinery here in Ballarat yet. So we can get in the water, we can get around the water, we can't get past the water though without pumping it out of the way. So alluvial mining was not all it was cracked up to be. People were finding a lot of gold dust in the creeks or underground in the deep lead mines, but the statistics realistically at this point in time was about 3 to 5% of every 100 men finding their fortune here in Ballarat, and most of them leaving at that point. 95% of every 100 men in the first 10 years were either trying to start some kind of a business on the Ballarat goldfields or they were living in poverty. When the companies arrived in 1861 and they brought with them that steam powered machinery, we can pump the water out of the way now, they could offer these men jobs. And this meant a stable income. They knew exactly where their next meal was coming from, and in fact 45% of every 100 men at that point were working for a company mine. Given the natural purity of the gold here in this region, we did at one point, in a very small space, have about 27 companies very similar to us operating all at the same time. Now, the gold, of course, that I have today in my furnace, it was not alluvial, it came from a quartz vein. So underground, huge amount of this rock runs north to south of about 45 degrees, and the miners underground, once we've pumped that water out of the way, are drilling into that rock. They are packing it with explosives, blowing it up, bringing it all up to the surface. This is already a more complex, longer-term method of mining. You can't really achieve this kind of company mining on a smaller scale. So once we've got all of this rock up here on the surface, the first step is to crush it down. We don't do that in here, they do that over in the battery house just next door to us. They're pushing all of that rock through a big machine, 10-head stamper. It's crushing the rock down until we've got something that looks a bit like this. Now, the gold inside a vein of quartz is still very thin. It looks a little bit like that, spread out. So what we need to do is we need to find a way to capture as much of this fine gold as we can. And they're doing the same thing you're doing at the creek. They are panning over there in the battery house. They're just doing it on an industrial scale. Now over there they have coated the tables with silver mercury. As they wash all of that quartz powder down those tables, the gold and the mercury will bind really well together. That's a good way for us to capture a lot of that gold. However, it does pose a problem for us because we need to remove that mercury as well as the silver, the copper, the iron, the zinc, and all of those other impurities. So step one for us is to put what's called an amalgam, which is a sticky ball of all of those things combined, into a retort. This is a cast iron pot down the front there. That goes into the furnace, and then we start bringing the temperature up. We are aiming for gold's melting point of 1064 degrees. That silver mercury will vaporize at about 360. So once we've removed the mercury, of course we've got the hazard of mercury poisoning. We are breathing that in as we continue to process throughout the day. This is probably the main hazard of this job, apart from the high temperatures. Now, at 1064 degrees, the gold will turn to a liquid. What happens inside our crucible back here is that the gold is 7 times heavier than everything else, so the separation of elements happens quite naturally with temperature. The gold will sink straight to the bottom, and it's the last thing to melt. So once I'm looking at liquid gold, I know everything else has separated and floated up to the top. That gets trapped in a binding agent called borax, which we've added, and then when it's hot enough to pour, the impurities will float backwards. They get trapped inside the grooves of a single-use clay crucible, and then what we're left with will be a bar or an ingot of 24 karat gold, which will be 99.99% in terms of purity and worth a lot more than it was when it came up from underground. Now we are getting to that point now, folks. Our gold has started to melt. I actually haven't taken it out straight away. We go a little bit higher than gold's melting point of 1064, purely because it actually drops temperature quite rapidly once it leaves the flames, and I don't want it to set back into a solid before it's being poured. So it's just a little safer to take the temperature higher. Gives you about 20 seconds to pour it safely before you will see it turn back into a solid. Now, this is all guesswork. There's no way to know for sure, other than melting point, because I can see that, what the temperature is. But the gold does vibrate differently. It turns a very bright white hot colour. I think we're ready now. Please feel free to take videos and photos. I will ask though that you stay seated, because this part is quite dangerous. As soon as that crucible leaves the flames there, the reason that it's dropping temperature so quickly is because gold is an excellent conductor of heat. It will cool down quickly if it's touching something, and at the moment it still is touching something. So what we've got right there is a solid bar of gold already.
Yum.
As soon as I bring it out of this mold though, it will pretty quickly lose its ability to remove heat, because it won't be touching on all sides anymore. It'll just be touching on the bottom. Okay. So it's only touching our metal there on the bottom at the moment, which means it's pretty much lost its ability to remove heat. It's sitting at about 700 to 800 degrees, quite comfortably. You can see that there. I need a pointier stick. So, what would we do with that now?
Water.
Does anybody want to pick it up?
No.
It's worth about $420,000.
I know.
Do you want it? Okay. It would take probably 5 or 6 hours for that to cool down to the point where it's safe enough for me to pick up and return to the company. But of course, with company mining, time is money. We do have approximately 8 to 12 of these bars being produced in this building every day at this point in time. So we don't have time for that to cool down, but what we do have is our knowledge of steam power to speed that process up. Alright, so over here in this corner we've got, we've very intentionally left some concrete and bricks to raise that gold bar up out of the water. The reason for that is because water does radiate heat and the gold bar doesn't. As soon as it touches the water, you've got heat, steam. It's very dangerous to stand too close to it. If I dropped that bar directly to the bottom of the water and the water was covering the bar, that would boil like a kettle. But we've given that bar room to remove that heat as steam, so theoretically this should be quite cold still. And we're all done with that one. So that's gone from 8 to 900 degrees down to a comfortable 9. What we've got there is 3 kilograms, or approximately 100 troy ounces of 24 karat gold, or 99.99% pure gold. What we would do with it now is we would stamp it with our company logo. So it gets the weight, quality all in the back here, goes to Melbourne to a bank. In 2024 though, I'm just going to double check that price because it has been going up. Ooh, somewhere between. So it's approximately $418,000 at the moment. We don't have that kind of money every time we want to melt something, and today that's about 8 times. So what we do is we just pop that back in the furnace, it gets remelted and recast over and over again. This same bar of gold has been with us for more than 50 years, I believe, which is over 120,000 demonstrations. It's as pure as it's ever going to be. It has been for quite some time. For that reason, folks, that one goes right there before I let you leave. Thank you so much for joining me today. Enjoy your afternoon.
That's a goal, a pure goal. Pure gold, Union, pure gold. A pure gold, a
Dia
pure
bilang
gold.
50 years udah dibikin buat demonstration.
Yeah, 120 times.
Iya, jadi dia bilang it's the purest
The
gold.
purest, I know.
That's 412. I was 14.
Because udah ngalamin berkali-kali.
Just like in the Bible, kan? You know, purified by fire. 120,000 times of demonstration. Purest, yeah. Yep, let's go.